The summer sea seethes. The storm howls with the clap of giant waves. Furious clouds pull them even higher, as if to flip the world upside down. Standing on the light tower, the Ghis commander surveys the stormy sea. As a son of a merchant fleet captain, he heard it countless times from his father since childhood. The autumn storms of the summer sea, how they arise from the gulf of grief to sweep across thousands of leagues, wrecking everything in their path as if they would not rest until the end of the world. At this moment, hundreds of warships, lined up one after another, anchored safely in the harbour. His heart was assured and swell with pride. His fleet was the cornerstone of the Empire's naval dominance in the summer sea. It protected the crucial lifeline of the Empire and oversaw thousands of ships carrying spices, grains, and slaves from the colonies, sailing toward Old Ghis every day. At this very hour, the Empire urgently needed more and more resources from its colonial daughters to win the fight against that brutal foe, the Valyrians and their dragons. A war it couldn't afford to lose. He stared at the distant clouds, calculating his strategies after the storm season. Once it dies down, he would sail forth with all of his strength now gathered in the harbour to seek and wipe out that pitiful, novice Valyrian fleet once and for all. Those shepherds had never been worthy of challenging the 1,000-year naval supremacy of the Empire. The endless canvas of dark clouds rolled the world in monochrome. Thunders rumbled in the distance. Hundreds of miles away, where his eyesight cannot reach, giant shadows were now closing in swiftly above the clouds. Covered by the roaring thunder, they are the true storm that rides the storms, aiming to destroy the naval pride of the Ghis, and with it, his empire. Essos lies next to Westeros across the narrow sea, gave birth to the first civilization of the known world, the old Empire of Ghis. It has a more than 10,000-year-old history, traced all the way back to the Age of Heroes, and certainly before the Valyrians tamed their first dragon. When the Valyrians were still shepherds living in mud-brick villages, the Ghis had already erected great pyramids for their harpy goddess. The homeland of the Empire was indeed blessed compared to other regions of Essos. When the hot, dry air of the Red Waste meets the cool, rainy breezes from the summer sea, they breed one of the most serene and fertile lands in Essos. Soon, this land saw its open plains and coastlines populated by early tribal settlers who thrived there, naming it Ghis. They first formed villages, which soon prospered. Over time, towns were built alongside them. Then eventually, the first city in history. That was 8,000 years ago. A Ghis chieftain known as Grazdan led his people to found their settlement on the coast of Ghis. He ordered them to put up a ring of stone walls all around it, and named it Old Ghis. The Ghis raised lofty towers and stepped pyramids, dedicating them to the Harpy, that revered winged goddess with the woman's face and the scorpion's sting. They drove slaves and dug up the abundant copper deposits within the nearby hills, churning out the fine bronze arms and armor for their citizen legions to further command and conquer. In those ancient days, warfare was often but a chaotic clash, throwing javelins, stones, and arrows back and forth, followed by two masses of men crashing into each other. But Grazdan, with his vision, came up with a new military reform. No longer would soldiers fight as individuals. They now marched and fought together in a dense, disciplined formation known as the Phalanx. With this moving spear wall, hundreds of men would advance, brace, and strike as one upon a commander's orders. Grazdan named this new Ghiskari army the Lockstep Legions. Against neighbouring armies who often fought and charged as foolhardy boars, every man for himself, these scary wars of spear won victory after victory for old Ghis. Within centuries, the Ghiskari legions swiftly swept over the region, subjugating city after city. The first great empire the world had known took shape. From the Red Waste to the Green Hell, the Harpy's Claw stretching across land and sea. Old Ghis reigned as the supreme emporium of Essos, standing for centuries as the centre of the slave trade across the Summer Sea. Ghiskari colonies spread out in Sothoios, providing the empire with new stocks of slaves, spices and minerals. Up north, its legions kept up their campaigns. They slashed with the Kingdom of Sarnor, a confederation of rivaling city-states along the Sarn River, while out west, the legion's outposts had reached the Painted Mountains, the north frontier of Valyrian Freehold on the peninsula. It was there the Ghiskari caught sight of dragon wings soaring past the Painted Mountains. They heard far-off roars carried along in the wind. This was the first time Ghiskari eyewitnessed the presence of Valyrian dragons. This ancient empire found itself irresistibly drawn to such a creature, such a force of destruction. It should have been their empire, first paragon of civilizations that was bestowed with this majestic power of dragons. At the same time, the Valyrians, an expansionist power themselves, sensed the growing threat from the Ghiskari Empire on land and sea. Ignoring the warning from the Freehold, the Ghiskari sailed towards the Isle of 100 Battles, later the Isle of Cedar. There, they established fortified colonies with pyramids to oversee the nearby waters. This action was the final provocation the Valyrians would endure. Negotiations broke down, and the ultimatum went unheard. The young giant and the old were now on courses destined to collide. The fire of war first began to rage in the north. Sounding the horn, the Ghiskari Empire marched its legions west, expecting to add yet another woe of the vanquished in the long annals of their conquests. Across the border, stretching from the Painted Mountains to the Gulf of Grief, the famed Lockstep Legions set out their assault on the Valyrian stronghold. The Valyrians met them with its own army on the northern plains of the coast. A great battle commenced. Both sides clashed with all their strength and fierceness. Bloody fighting ensued. But gradually, the formidable spear walls of the Ghiskari gained the upper hand. The disciplined veterans of the Legion pushed forward, the lines of the Valyrians buckling under the might of Ghiskari phalanx. Its defeat seemed imminent. Then, the dragons arrived. They dived down from the sky as sudden rains of flame torrents raged in the formations of the Ghiskari legions. Smoke, heat, followed by screams and smells of burning filled the air. Firestorms rose from the Ghiskari line as all hell was let loose, and a haze thick with the ashes of men turned everything dull and dark. The regrouped Valyrians fought back, and the Ghiskari legions, despite their renowned discipline, finally broke and fled. In the blink of an eye, the Valyrian dragons had turned the tide of battle. The victory of the first war encouraged the Valyrians to strike back. However, in the following war, they soon discovered the Ghiskari, mastering arms of slave labour, built up its defence along the Painted Mountains, connected by forts and outposts. The dragon's aerial supremacy was limited in these treacherous terrain of narrow canyons and ravines. Nevertheless, the dragons hovered over the sky, burning every fort and outpost entering their sights. But wherever the dragons were not present, the Ghiskari legionnaires stubbornly manned their positions. Launching devastating attacks from the high ground, they inflicted heavy casualties on the Valyrians, grinding the war into a frustrating and costly stalemate. As war fatigue began to set in on both sides, the Valyrians sent emissaries to the north, Kingdom of Sarnor, a historic rival of the Ghiskari Empire. The Sarnori settled in a series of city-states along the River Sarn in the north. They had long feared the might of the Ghiskari legions, having suffered defeats at their hands in the past. However, Valeria's victory in the First War, and the tales of how dragons had shattered the formidable lockstep legions, convinced them to cast their lot with the Freehold. The Forge of the Alliance opened a second front, a nasty surprise for the Ghiskari. The Sarnori chariots rode with the Valyrian dragons on the open plains and steadily drove back the Ghiskari garrison away from the Sarn River all the way south. This strategic diversion forced the Ghiskari to redirect their legions from the Painted Mountains to meet this new threat, stretching the Ghiskari defensive lines dangerously thin. The united offensive in the north created the precious time window the Valyrians had long been waiting for. With elite Ghiskari legions being redeployed to the plains, the once impregnable defences of fortresses in the Painted Mountains were now dangerously undermanned. Seizing this critical moment, the Valyrians massed their dragons and ground forces for a single, overwhelming assault, determined to break the long and bloody stalemate. Even with reduced numbers, the Ghiskari garrisons fought with stubborn ferocity. But this time, the undermanned fortresses could not withstand the combined momentum of dragon lords and a determined final push from the battle-hardened Valyrians. One by one, the Ghiskari forts burned or fell, and the last of their garrisons were shattered and driven from the mountains entirely. Securing the Painted Mountains granted them strategic control over the northern coast of Slavers Bay. To cement their new dominion, they extended the Valyrian road along the coast and established the fortified settlement of Borash as a mark of their hard-won triumph in the Second War. While the war was ultimately considered a Valyrian victory, it was a brutal, hard-fought one, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Centuries later, the unearthing of a Ghiskari obelisk in the northern plains, whose inscriptions recorded lines of captured Valyrian soldiers walking in dismay, still tells us their long-forgotten history of fire and blood. Despite the victory, the Valyrians cannot rest easy. The strategic strength of Ghis Empire was never weakened. After all, the mighty Ghiskari fleet, which the Valyrians could not yet challenge, was the lifeblood of the Empire, ensuring that a ceaseless river of wealth, resources, and slaves flowed from its colonies to the heartland. This immense strategic depth meant that any losses of the Ghiskari on the battlefield could be replaced sooner or later. The Pyrrhic victory of the Valyrians might be merely a temporary setback for the Ghiskari, as the old empire could always recover, rebuild its legions, and potentially come back even stronger. To challenge the naval dominance of the Ghiskari, the Valyrians must do the impossible: defeat the Grand Fleet of the Empire. This armada sails to patrol between Old Ghis and its colonial daughters' entire spring and summer, only to retire in autumn, when the summer sea, known for its warm water under the sun, turns to a rage of howling hurricanes and ship-splintering waves, making any voyage a suicide attempt. To shelter from the storms, the Ghis harbour their fleet all together at Gorgai, a heavily defended fortress on the largest of the Basilisk Isles, thousands of leagues from the shores of Essos. To the Ghis, any thoughts of attacks across the summer sea on the harbour during the Tempest season is a madness itself that is never heard of in naval history. But the dragons ride the storm, flying across thousands of leagues on the stormy sea. The Valyrian dragon lords rose above the dark clouds. The howling wind and roaring thunder became perfect masquerade as giant, dark shadows descended from the sky unexpectedly upon the fleet. The Ghis garrison were caught completely off guard. Panic erupted as one dragon after another swooped down. Dozens of streams of fire bursted out, turned those wooden ships, sitting anchored in neat, tightly packed rows, into a roaring inferno. The howling wind from the sea whipped up the dragonfire to an even stronger firestorm, raging from sail to sail, from ship to ship. The galleys had nowhere to escape. Vessels consumed by the inferno, burnt as giant, floating torches. Soon, the entire bay was a cauldron of fire. The light from 1,000 burning pyres was so intense that it turned the black, stormy night into a hellish, flickering dawn. The grand fleet of the Ghis, the pride of the Empire, were now only a few charred hulls, floating soullessly on the burning sea. The Valyrians took Gorgai and renamed this once great city, now a devastated ruin, Gogosos, and turned it into a heinous penal colony. Following the destruction of the Ghis fleet and the fall of the Gorgai, the gate to the Ghis colonies was rammed wide open. From Gorgai, Valyrian armies landed on the Asoiaf, swarming to the east without mercy. The Fourth War saw the Valyrians continue their conquest, sweeping through city after city as they burned and looted across the coast of Asoiaf. With their fleet destroyed, the Ghis were strangled on the homeland in Essos, powerless to stop them. The fear of their own destruction looms and haunts their hearts. For how long will the same destruction fall upon their homeland, the old Ghis? Will there be any survivors to live on and sing the lament for their civilization? That end eventually came in the Fifth War, when the Valyrians marched across the Skahazadhan River, aiming to besiege the dying heart of the Ghis Empire and eliminate it once and for all. In the final days of their civilization, the people of Old Ghis put up their last stand against the Valyrians' dragons diving from above. But the Ghis only delayed the inevitable for a few more lines on the history recordings. Pyramids were burned down or demolished. Obelisks writing their legends were pulled down along with the harpy statues, broken apart. The residents were slaughtered en masse or turned to ash. The thousands-year-old Ghis Empire is no more. Facing the woe of the vanquished, the Valyrians chose to inherit the demonic institution of slavery from the still warm ruins of the very empire they had just conquered. The dragon's greed seized the heart of the new conquerors. All of these treasures, loots, and power vacuum, the vast trade network the empire left behind, rich with shining jewels, fragrant spices, and valuable metal ores, required the blood, toil, and sweat of millions of slaves for them to enjoy. The Valyrians rounded up the remaining Ghis, shackled them, and forced them on a death march back to Valyria. There, their destiny was to work in deep mines to their last breath under the 14 flames that filled with suffocating heat, smoke, and poisonous gas. A destiny that will soon be shared by other nations of Essos. Thank you for watching this video. If you like it, please give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Share your comments down below, and I will see you in the next one.